All right. I will need to borrow the keyboard. So it's Sunday afternoon, you just had lunch, I've turned the lights off. If you need to stay awake, there's still some rock melon slices over there. Feel free to chew through those through my presentation. Nice and refreshing. All right. So, where am I going to put this? Somewhere. Okay. All right. I need to, see that. Okay. The following presentation uses information and sources that are external to the Bible. If you have any questions or comments regarding this information, please discuss them with me afterwards, if you feel a need to. All right. The title of my presentation today is Milestones of Failure, which sounds a bit like a soap opera. So, this afternoon I'm going to be discussing some atheist observations of the start of the universe and going through to modern times. So what I'd like to do with this presentation is look at some of the points along the way where their explanations don't seem to work, or they rely on just as much faith as believing in a creator. And Sister Kate, she mentioned some of this, that this is some of the things that she sort of struggled to contend with, the explanations that have been provided by science to say this is where everything began. And we even had a gift talking about the Lord, the Holy Spirit being there in the beginning and, creating the stars and all those things. And I'm going to talk about those things as well. And we even talked about this a little bit on Friday night about in the beginning there was nothing, the void, the unreality, as David put it, and where all these things came from. In case you're wondering, that is actually orange. So the first part I want to talk about is the beginning of all things through to the creation of the earth. I'm planning on doing an additional presentation which starts to look at a few more things about the beginning of life and where we get up to today. But I want to talk about the cosmos. So to begin with, I just want to go through the scripture. In Romans, it says, as you can read there, the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, us. We are the creation. And as we look upon the things around us, sorry, I've got to start my timer. It's going to be a problem. All right. As we look at the things that are around us, it is clearly evident that God made them. In all its wonder, in all its beauty, in all its, awesome power, we look at that and go, that has to have come from somewhere. And for the most part, those that are in this room, we understand that they are made from God. But there are many people who don't want to believe that. And so professing themselves to be wise, they became fools because they came up with another reason to go, no, that doesn't make sense. So we will study it, we will explore it, we will look into it, and in our knowledge and in our understanding, we will come up with a way that makes sense to us. And God says in this process, they become fools. They become foolish because they want to separate themselves from God. And as we read there in verse 25, who changed the truth of God into a lie and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Now, this does typically have more pagan origins in terms of what that scripture means. But as you project it through to our modern times, it's still a form of worshipping the creature. It's a form of worshipping the creation rather than the Creator, to say, this is where it came from. It came from Mother Earth. It came from the forces of nature. It came from things that are separate to God. That is what they look to put their knowledge and their faith and belief in. Sorry, I spelled that wrong. There we go, fix that one up. So we understand that God has always existed, and through faith we believe that he created everything. That is what we read in Genesis, that as it's described here, in the beginning he created all things. He created the heaven and the earth, and as we go to read on in chapter 1, he goes and creates all of the things that we see in front of us. I like that quote. However, it's not quite what many scientists say have happened. So we'll have a look at a very reliable source in terms of the description of everything. So if you need a bit of time to read that, I'll give it to you. If you can read it. So Calvin proposed that they call it the horrendous space kablooey, but I like the statement that he makes up in the top right, where he says, trying to describe things of unimaginable wonder. And it's that thing where they go, this is something so powerful and so incredible, yet we will simplify it and label it as a Big Bang. Because rather than see it in the view of the awesome majesty and power of God, they have decided to go, well, if we just stick a nice little scientific label on it, it lessens what it means to us. Sorry, not too far. So in this theory of the Big Bang, the idea is that from this atom, size of a pinhead, all of a sudden, everything came. It all expanded rapidly. And in that process of time, it formed many, many things right up until what we have today. So in this quote, it's talking about the fact that what they have come up with in their studies is that we've got 13.8 billion years to play with. We've gone, okay, this is how long we think everything took. This is the age that we have studied the stars to say this is how old they are. And that everything that we can see came from a single point, a single crunched up nucleus of an atom. And it was not so much an explosion, as they say, but a rapid expansion. I don't know what the difference is, but they like to make that distinction. And this thing has been labelled as the primeval atom. And it's this thing that I want to place in counterpoint to belief in God, is belief in the primeval atom. So from this single point, this super dense atom, the universe sprang forth for no particular reason that they can come up with. For some reason, everything was collapsed into this single atom, and it just happened one day, or where they didn't have days, they didn't have time. What they observe, they look back and go, from there, everything just happened. But surely you should give us a reason for that to occur. But in that belief, it's that is where everything started. So in this point here, it says, it had to be so incredibly dense and hot that the physics we know today, learned from centuries of studying the universe we see around us, does not help us understand what that atom was like. So in the view of science where we've gone, we have to have an explanation from where everything came from, using what they know and extrapolating and looking back to say, this is the theory. It gets to a point where they say, we don't know how that works. We don't know how it happens. Now, if you're studying the universe and you're saying, well, we can see that it is expanding, which by rewinding it, it all comes back to a single point of origin where it all came forth from, maybe you're seeing what God did. Because if God said, the earth was without form or void, and I moved on the waters and I said, let there be light, and light sprang into the universe, it might be that that's what they're seeing. But they don't want to recognize it as God. So, they have faith in the primeval atom. Who do you choose? A supreme benevolent creator, or a force of uncertain energy and chaos, which you can't figure out? So that's where they think everything came from. All right, so we're going to go to the next point. So that was the first milestone of failure, where they go, this is where everything started, but we don't know why, we don't know how, it doesn't work with our physics and our understanding. But that's what they believe, and it doesn't work. So the second one we're going to talk about is the forming of the stars. Now, I'm trying to abridge this because the idea behind this is to give you a bit of an idea of what they are saying happened, so that you can understand where they acknowledge that it doesn't work. Now, I don't want you to get too confused about the whole process and all that, so I'm trying to keep it pretty simple, but I'm not trying to do that to obscure any facts or anything like that. We can talk about it in length if you have any concerns. But the way that they explain this to happen is that the atom expands, off it goes. It starts to grow rapidly, and with the horrendous space kablooey, as it expands, it becomes less dense. So all of the particulate matter that's in there becomes less dense because it spreads out, and it becomes less hot. And as they say, it becomes more comprehensible to science. So it reaches a point where they go, oh yeah, it starts to make sense now in terms of physics and our equations and all those sorts of things. And so during this phase, all of those that fog is filled with hot glowing elementary particles, which are the building blocks of what we understand things are made out of. So they reckon that 38,000 years after that initial point, the temperature dropped to a point where the atoms could start to form and stay together. And this is where they look at what everything is made up of. Don't believe atoms, they make up everything, as they say. But what they surmise happened is that as the glowing fog vanished and the atoms started to form, everything went dark. There were no stars, and it was known as the Dark Age. But what tends to happen then, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is that the stars begin to form. But these ones were very, very bright. They were blue, and they were short-lived. And what happens is they get created, they burn bright and hot. They reach the end of their lifespan, they collapse, they supernova, and in that explosion, they spread more matter throughout the universe. And when during their lives, they produce energy by turning hydrogen into the other elements that we see throughout the universe. So these elements are then, as the star explodes, they spread out further into the universe, and it seeds the universe with the ingredients to make planets and things like that, and chemicals to make living things. So this is where they say it happens. It grows, stars form, collapse, spread more and more, and the constellations go. So we know the universe is illuminated by countless billions of stars, so there must have been a moment when the first stars formed, lighting up the young universe. So obviously they went, well, if we think everything started from a point and then grew from there, we see the stars, so they must have formed somehow. So we have to come up with an explanation of how that worked and how they got so far in the universe. And as we read in Genesis, God said, "Let there be," and it was so. Now, we don't know how this process worked. We can either say that God said, "Let there be light," and they existed where they are today. Or he could have created them in his hand of such enormous universal size and cast them into the universe. And that's what we see, the remnants of them floating. We don't know. But we know that God in his power put them where they were and said, Make it so, for you Star Trek fans. All right. I don't know if any of you in this. So now we're going to talk about the forming of planets. So stars and planets are formed in what they call accretion disks. So what happens is that there's matter that's dispersed into space, and as they start to get together, the mass starts to create gravitational wells, and then they start to get pulled into it, and they form a spiral as they get gathered in. And it's in this process that they talk about, we believe that this is where stars are formed. A protostar grows by acquiring mass from this surrounding envelope of interstellar dust and gas. So there's all this stuff, and it starts to gather together. And then the dust and stars contain elements such as carbon and iron, which can help form planetary systems. So when a star is forming in its disk, which is known as its T Tauri phase, it is ejecting extremely hot winds dominated by positively charged particles called protons and neutral helium atoms. So what that means is that some of the stuff gets sucked in, some of the stuff gets blown away, and the stuff that gets blown away starts to gather together, and in its section of this disk starts to form and collapse and to begin to create planets as they theorize. So dust clumps become pebbles and then larger rocks that grind together to expand. And it says the presence of gas helps particles of solid materials stick together. But what happens with the star is that as it continues to contract, its internal temperature gets rising until it ignites and it starts to burn hydrogen. So basically what they're saying is all of the stuff gets thrown out into the galaxy, into the universe, and then it starts to gather together, it collapses, it ignites and forms a star. And while it's blowing these solar winds, the same stuff is happening to different planets. The closer you are to the sun, all of the rocks and sort of things gather together. The further you are away, because it's colder, the gas molecules can stick together and amass into giant planetary cores, and that's where you get your larger gas giants and things like that. Well, what they say is the details of exactly where planets prefer to form in disks is still a mystery and an open area of research. So even in this theory they go, well, we have to explain where it all came from, how it all works. So this is the theory, that all the matter gets together, it collapses, gravity wells, it ignites, it blows this here, they gather there. Even in all that explanation, they look at that and they say, we don't know why they form where they form. It still doesn't open up an understanding towards them. They don't know why they do what they do. God does. He puts the stars where he likes. He knows every single one of them. He telleth them by name. He goes, I know what that one's called. It's all demonstration of my power and majesty throughout the universe. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. The believers of the primeval Adam say the stars form in random locations because of reasons unknown. But God says in his word, I put them throughout the heavens to show you my power. And they build a better telescope, and what does it show? More planets, more stars, more universe. He stretches out the north over the empty place and hangeth the earth upon nothing. God chose where the earth was going to be, and we're going to look at that now. Why is the earth able to sustain life, and is it unique? For life to exist on earth or anywhere else in the universe, there are many factors that have to be in place for that to happen. One of those factors is our star. Our star is a G-type star, which is the one down the bottom, which, as you can see, not as common. There's only 10 billion. Oh no, that's the longevity, sorry. Relative abundance, 1-star rating. There are more, but they are shorter lived and less common. Scientists are looking for the K-type stars, which are the ones in the middle, because they burn longer and they are more abundant. And the reason for that is because they are more likely for life to have evolved around it. Why? Because science needs time. Science needs time for all of the random probabilities and chances to unfold. And that's why they look in the universe for these particular types of stars, because they say for evolution to occur, it has to have time based on all of our explanation of everything like that. And that's why they look for it. But as we know that you need the right circumstances for life to occur, you know, it can't be too hot or too cold, because the main thing that needs life is water. Too close, it evaporates. Too far, it freezes. You've got to be in just the right spot. But there's quite a number of other things that are required for life. You need an atmosphere to keep air in, to keep oxygen in. You need a magnetic field to keep solar radiation from destroying everything. Even the gas giants that are in our solar system, they protect us from incoming objects, from asteroids, from meteors, from alien invaders, from whatever else is out there that is likely to collide with the Earth. They are big buffers that they pull them in through their gravitational fields, and they provide protection. What are the chances that there is life elsewhere in the galaxy? Because that's what they're looking for, habitable planets. So I'm not going to explain the top one. I can if you want me to. Come and see me later and we'll go through it. But the top equation is the Drake equation. And he came up with it in 1965. And it was to estimate how common technologically advanced civilizations might be across the Milky Way galaxy. But this was in part of a project to check for radio communication. So they'd send signals out and they're like, is anyone going to send us a message back? So they came up with this equation to figure out how likely is it that there would be other civilizations across the galaxy. So they had to solve for n, which is on the far left, and they put in all of those factors to determine this probability. This calculation arrives at an estimated figure of 100 million worlds where life has been forged by evolution. So in 1965, this is the Drake equation. Now, there was some discrepancy, and they were talking about, is this really true? How likely is this to happen? So since then, they built better telescopes, and they found more exoplanets and more planets that are in habitable zones. Now, what they actually did is they said that this equation didn't offer concrete answers. We need more certainty about this. So this equation was reviewed in 2016 by Frank and Woodrow Sullivan, astronomers at the University of Washington, to answer the question. This is the question. Are you ready? What are the odds that intelligent life evolved on Earth and nowhere else among the 20 billion trillion stars in the observable universe across 13.8 billion years of cosmic history? That's what we're asking. So we've gone from, we reckon there's 100 million worlds like Earth. And they went, okay, let's look at it a bit differently. So they labelled this the archaeological form of the Drake equation. You don't have to remember all this, I'm just telling you what they've discovered. But they simplified it. So they said, all right, where A is the number of intelligent technical civilizations, N is the now known in 2016, now known astronomical data, and F represents the unknown biological elements. So as you know, you can reverse engineer an equation. They said, well, we know what A is. Who can tell me what A is? It's 1. The number of technologically advanced civilizations in the universe is 1, known ones. And then they went, okay, well, we know what n is, because we've got those values. We've studied the universe and how many planets and galaxies there are. So we'll turn the equation around and we'll figure out what f is, the unknown biological requirements. The resulting probability turns out to be very, very low. And this is what they said. If I have a bag of planets, and these are planets in the right place to form life, so they're in the right habitable zone, how many of those do I have to sort through before I get to one that has a civilization like ours on it? So we're talking about planets that are in a habitable zone that could support life. How many others out there could have gotten to where we are today? Frank asked. In order for us to be the only time that this has ever happened in the entire history of the universe, we'd have to go through 10 billion trillion before we'd get to one like us. So we've gone from 100 million worlds that are like us to actually maybe it's 1 in 10 billion trillion. We're getting further and further away the more that we know. Now, there's actually one more. Oh, you like that, didn't you? Astrophysicist Erik Zachrisson from the Uppsala University in Sweden, with the aid of a computer model that simulated the universe's evolution following the Big Bang, combined information about known exoplanets with our understanding of the early universe and the law of physics to recreate the past 13.8 billion years. So what he did in this computer model is he said, all right, from what we know, how many things there are, I'll put all those values in, I'll click go, and we'll simulate the Big Bang, the seeding of the universe, the creation of stars, the creation of planets, and see what we get based on our values. His research indicates that from a purely statistical standpoint, Earth perhaps shouldn't exist. Based on the simulated program, with what they understand of physics today, Earth, statistically speaking, perhaps shouldn't exist. And to know how much it perhaps shouldn't exist, Earth may be 1 in 700 quintillion kind of place, a 7 followed by 20 zeros. That's the result of that simulation, based on what they know with science today. And this is from his research. Still, the model is based on what we currently understand about the universe, and if there's one thing we have figured out so far, it's that we still don't know very much. So this is the people that have decided that they don't want to acknowledge the existence of God, and so they have to explain where everything came from. And in doing so, the more they research it, the more they realise Earth, us, we probably shouldn't be here, through their own studies. Heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. What house will ye build me, saith the Lord, or what is the place of my rest? We are here because God put us here. He said, I'm going to make this place and I'm going to fill it with my creation and I'm going to have a relationship with them. And they will look upon the stars and they will study everything and they will wonder how on earth they got here. When I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou visiteth him? You know, as people study the cosmos, as they study the vastness of the universe, when they think of God, they go, where do I fit in with all of this? Now, if you believe in the primeval Adam, then you're not considered at all. You're a byproduct of happenstance and just a bundle of energy that will dissipate one day. But when you consider God in his infinite power and all of the wonders that he's placed in the heavens, he still looks on you and says, I care about you. I put the stars further than you could see. I placed the earth exactly where I wanted it to be, and I still want to have a relationship with you. He cares for us. A primeval Adam cares for nothing. So, just to recap, where did the universe come from? a primeval Adam, or the existent one, the I am that I am, the one that has always been, the one that is always there? Who made the stars? Was it a reaction of supernovae, or was it God? Who made the planets? Accretion disks, or God? And what are the chances of Earth even existing? Is it a random possibility or deliberate placement? People can choose to find a reason to explain how everything came to be so that they don't have to acknowledge the existence of God. But what they've actually come up with requires faith, because their explanation is beyond their understanding. It requires faith to believe that everything exploded from a single atom, and in the process of time, circumstance, happenstance, and all the other stances, and causality made us who we are today. That requires faith, because when they study it, when they look at it, there are milestones of failure where they go, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't work, I don't know how this works, but yet I choose to believe in it instead. As I mentioned, you don't actually have to understand the science behind their explanation, but if you understand these concepts, you can dig a bit deeper into what someone truly believes. Because if they say, I don't believe in God because it doesn't make sense. Okay, what do you believe in? I believe in the Big Bang. Okay, what was there at the beginning? Oh, I don't know. Where did it come from? Why did it happen? Oh, I don't know. Okay, well, there's a lot about what you don't know. You know what I know? I know that God works with people. I know that the creator of the universe has a vested interest in me, and you can have that as well. You can try and be blind to it. You can try and create another reality. But when you dig a bit deeper into what these people believe, and it's not to have a go at them, but it's try to bring them around to say, do you really want to know the power of the universe? Because I can share it with you. All right. The wonders of the universe point us to the power of the Creator, and in doing so we can acknowledge and revere Him and say how excellent His name is in all the earth. And all the people said,